Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are exploring a topic that is just universally essential, yet so often profoundly misunderstood, and that is listening accuracy.
That's right. And we're not just talking about, passively letting sound waves hit your eardrums.
No, not at all. We're talking about the active cognitive process,
Yeah.
the real work required to truly hear, to process, and to accurately comprehend information.
And this matters everywhere, whether you're a language learner trying to navigate a new environment or you're in a complex professional negotiation.
Or even just trying to maintain a deep personal relationship. It's fundamental.
It really is. The problem is, in our world, our notification-saturated, hyper-connected world, we are just constantly bombarded.
By noise, by data, by distractions.
Exactly. And it makes the act of truly hearing and accurately processing the nuance in someone's message, it makes it overwhelmingly difficult.
Most people, I think, treat listening as this passive thing. But as we're going to unpack today, it's an incredibly active, multi-layered cognitive symphony. It demands huge mental resources.
It really does. It's much more than just a soft skill.
Oh, absolutely. It's a cognitive superpower.
Yeah.
A superpower that's, foundational for professional success, certainly, but also for building trust and achieving clarity in really high-stakes environments.
And like any superpower, it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to systematic attack.
Which is what we're here to talk about. Today, we're dissecting the two most powerful forces that influence this system. The major disruptors we're all constantly battling.
Right. So first, the powerful adversary, stress, the saboteur.
And second, the essential ally, the tool you can use to fight back. Intentional focus.
Our mission in this deep dive is to go right down to the neural hardware. We want to understand the specific neurobiological mechanics behind all of this.
We're going to dissect how chronic stress systematically sabotages the brain's ability to process nuance, and then explore how intentional focus acts as a trainable ally to sharpen your comprehension.
And by the end, our hope is that you, the listener, feel equipped with some real tools to reclaim your ability to truly hear and understand the world.
So we'll start by tracing the journey of sound, from a wave in the air to an idea in the mind. Then we'll expose how stress and certain linguistic hurdles can break that system.
And finally, we'll give you an arsenal of actionable strategies to enhance your focus and manage that internal noise.
Okay, let's unpack this complex machinery. We have to start with the physical, right?
Okay.
The sound wave itself. Walk us through how a simple vibration in the air actually turns into a meaningful idea inside our heads.
It's a miracle of biological engineering, really. It all starts purely mechanically. Sound waves, just vibrations in the air, are collected by the shape of your outer ear.
That big funnel on the side of your head.
Exactly. That funnel directs them down the ear canal to the eardrum, which, just like a drum skin, starts to vibrate in response.
And those vibrations get passed into the middle ear. This is where we find that famous trio of tiny bones, the ossicles.
The smallest bones in the human body, and they do some incredible heavy lifting. They act as a series of levers.
So they're not just passing the vibration along, they're changing it.
They're amplifying it. They massively amplify the sound signal, which makes the next stage of the conversion process incredibly efficient.
Okay, so this amplified vibration then reaches the inner ear, specifically a structure called the cochlea.
The cochlea, yeah, that spiral-shaped, snail shell-like structure. And this is the crucial point of signal conversion. This is where everything changes.
This is where the magic happens. Because inside the cochlea, you've got these specialized hair cells.
Right, and it's these tiny hair cells that finally convert the mechanical energy of the vibration into electrical neural signals, the only language the brain can actually read.
Without that step, sound is just physics. It's just vibration. It has no meaning.
Precisely.
Right.
So now we have an electrical signal, and it starts its journey on the auditory nerve, the first destination, the brainstem. We can think of it as the brain's initial sorting office.
A sorting office, I like that. So it's a relay station, but it's already doing essential subconscious work that we're never aware of.
Oh, absolutely. It's sorting, it's timing, it's prioritizing this massive stream of auditory data. It's doing basic filtering, sound localization.
Like figuring out if a car is coming from your left or your right.
Exactly that. And it's recognizing rudimentary patterns. All of this happens at lightning speed.
So it's cleaning up the signal before passing it upstairs.
That's a great way to put it. That foundational work ensures the signal is somewhat clean before it's passed up to the higher centers. And the next stop is the thalamus.
Which is often described as the brain's main sensory switchboard, right?
It's the central hub, the staging area for almost all sensory information coming in. It takes that refined auditory data and directs it precisely where it needs to go next.
Which is the auditory cortex located in the temporal lobe.
Correct. And it's in the auditory cortex that those raw electrical signals are finally processed into the conscious acoustic qualities we perceive: pitch, loudness, timbre.
So this is how you can tell the difference between a high-pitched shriek and a low, deep rumble. It's the what of the sound.
It's the what. But hearing the what, the acoustic quality, is miles away from understanding the meaning. And this is the enormous gap the brain has to bridge.
Right. How do we go from an electrical signal that just represents a sound quality to a meaningful idea, a concept, or a command?
That's where we move into what are called the deeper association areas. The signals spread out from that primary cortex, flowing into these incredibly complex neural networks.
And a key destination is Wernicke's area.
Yes, Wernicke's area is absolutely central for language comprehension, for understanding semantics, the meaning of words.
But it's not just Wernicke's area working in a silo, is it?
Not at all. This information has to integrate across different lobes of the brain, the frontal, the parietal. It has to tap into two massive pools of memory.
Okay, so what are those?
First, we need semantic memory. This is your internal encyclopedia. It's your database of concepts, definitions, and facts about the world.
The meaning of the word dog.
Exactly. And second, you need episodic memory. This provides the context, the history of conversations you've had with this specific person, the emotional flavor, the situational history.
Ah, so semantic memory knows what a dog is, but episodic memory knows that this person's dog just passed away, so their tone might be sad.
Precisely. And it's this massive instantaneous integration, this interplay between sound, language, context, and emotion that finally converts fragmented sounds into coherent, meaningful ideas.
Wow, that sounds like an extremely heavy cognitive load.
Yeah.
It demands constant split-second control. It implies there has to be a true central command center managing all this traffic.
There is, and it has to be the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
The CEO of the brain.
Absolutely indispensable. The PFC governs our executive functions. These are the higher-level cognitive skills that truly dictate the fidelity and the accuracy of how we process that incoming signal.
So without strong executive control from the PFC, all that carefully processed auditory data just remains fragmented noise. It doesn't become understanding.
You've got it. The PFC is the command center for accuracy.
Okay, so let's break down those critical executive functions. These are the tools the PFC uses to ensure we're hearing accurately. First up, working memory. The mental scratch pad. Why is having a robust working memory so vital for listening?
Well, working memory is your brain's temporary holding space. It's like the RAM in your computer. Think about a complex sentence, maybe one with several different clauses.
Okay.
You need to hold the beginning of that sentence, the subject, the main idea, in your mind long enough to connect it to the end, where the final meaning is often delivered.
So if I'm getting complex instructions and my working memory is impaired, maybe I'm distracted or stressed, that holding space is just too small.
It's too small. The beginning of the sentence gets pushed out before you've heard the end. The sentence fragments. You literally lose the thread.
And you end up with incomplete information, or you have to ask them to repeat themselves, which isn't always possible in a fast-paced conversation.
Exactly. A strong working memory lets you integrate those complex sentences into whole, meaningful concepts before the sound even vanishes.
Okay, next executive function. Attention control. This seems obvious, but you're saying it's actually two distinct skills.
It is. We need both selective attention and sustained attention. Selective attention is your ability to tune into one voice in a crowded room.
The classic cocktail party effect.
That's the one, actively prioritizing one signal while suppressing all the others. And this relies on what's called the ventral attention network.
Which is the bottom-up system, right? The reactive one that grabs your attention when something unexpected happens, like your phone buzzing.
Correct. But for intentional, accurate listening, we rely much more heavily on the dorsal attention network. This is the top-down, goal-directed system.
And that's what manages sustained attention.
Yes, the vigilance required to maintain focus through a long meeting, a dense technical lecture, or an emotionally charged conversation, all while resisting the internal pull of distraction.
Which brings us to the next function, inhibition. This sounds crucial. It's the active blocking of competing signals. What kinds of signals are we blocking?
Well, we're blocking two sets of noise. There's the external noise, of course, traffic, the hum of an air conditioner. But perhaps more dangerously, we have to block internal noise.
The mental to-do list.
The mental to-do list, the wordy loops, the argument you had this morning, the constant self-criticism. That internal chatter, if it's left unchecked, is often the loudest and most powerful distraction of all.
And the brain has a specific system for this.
It does. The anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, acts like a smoke detector. It detects conflict, the tension between your goal, which is listening, and your distraction, which is worrying.
And then the PFC steps in to actually dampen that distraction.
That's the coordinated effort. But if the ACC is tired, or if the PFC is overloaded, that inhibitory function fails. The internal noise wins, it drains your cognitive resources, and you simply cannot isolate the speaker's signal effectively anymore.
Okay, and the final key executive function you mentioned is cognitive flexibility. Why does the ability to shift perspective matter so much for listening accuracy?
Because conversations are dynamic, they're not static. New information is constantly arriving, the tone shifts, the context changes. If you get stuck on your initial interpretation.
Like maybe you misheard the first word or you decided early on that the speaker was angry.
Exactly. If you're rigid, you'll miss all the subsequent information that might contradict that initial flawed view.
So cognitive flexibility is the ability to instantaneously reevaluate and update your understanding as the conversation unfolds. It stops you from getting locked into rigid thinking.
It's essential for navigating complex or nuanced ideas. It's really a unified system.
Yeah.
The PFC has to use sustained attention and inhibition at the same time to feed clean data into a working memory that's ready to be cognitively flexible.
That coordinated system, when it works, it allows for profound comprehension. Yeah. What happens when we introduce chronic, persistent pressure? What happens when that beautiful system is under systematic attack?
The wrench in the works. Stress. Biologically, stress is that ancient survival mechanism, the fight-or-flight response.
It was designed for escaping a predator on the savannah, not for decoding a subtle negotiation in a conference room.
And we have to make a really critical distinction here. Acute stress, a short burst of pressure before a deadline, can actually sharpen focus for a moment.
But that's not what we're talking about.
No. The devastating saboteur of listening accuracy is chronic stress. That prolonged, persistent pressure from job demands, financial insecurity, or ongoing conflict. That's the one that causes systemic failure.
And it's so damaging because it literally starts compromising the physical structures of the brain's control center. So what is this sustained internal alarm system actually doing to our hardware?
The main culprit here is the sustained excessive release of cortisol, which is the body's primary stress hormone.
Okay.
And we now know from a huge body of research that chronically high levels of cortisol are profoundly neurotoxic. They are toxic to your neurons.
What does that mean in practice?
It means they cause dendrites, the branches and connections between your neurons, to literally prune back and retract.
So they don't just interrupt the connection, they cause physical degradation.
Actual physical degradation. The volume of critical brain areas can actually shrink. Specifically, the PFC, the command center we just talked about, and the hippocampus, which is essential for memory formation.
Wow. That's the crucial takeaway, isn't it? Stress isn't just a feeling. It's physically damaging the hardware you need for clear thinking.
It is. It's like running your computer's processor constantly at maximum voltage. The internal components eventually degrade and break down, and that leads to systematic performance failure in attention and working memory.
So stress is a hardware failure, not just a temporary behavioral lapse. And alongside that cortisol, we're also getting adrenaline and noradrenaline.
Exactly. And those hormones are jacking up your heart rate, they're heightening your sensory awareness, all to prepare the body for physical action to run or to fight.
But that's a diversion of energy.
It's a massive diversion. Resources are pulled away from the subtle, higher-level cognitive processing you need for accurate, nuanced communication. Your brain is running on an emergency power setting, and careful listening is deemed a non-essential luxury.
And this leads directly to the first major cognitive hit, a severely limited working memory.
Yes. When the PFC is just swimming in cortisol, it struggles to hold on to and update information. So if you're stressed and someone gives you complex instructions,
Your working memory just can't integrate it.
it can't. The message fragments, the earlier words vanish, and you end up misunderstanding or making mistakes based on totally incomplete information.
This memory impairment then fuels what's often called cognitive tunnel vision.
That's right. The brain is in survival mode. It focuses intensely, almost obsessively, on the perceived threat.
So you latch onto specific, often negative words like problem, delay, mistake, and you filter out everything else.
All the context, all nuance, the mitigating factors, any positive information, it all gets filtered out.
So it sounds like the stressed brain is actively editing the incoming message to confirm its existing fears. It's an evolutionary mechanism, but it's just horribly misused in a modern communication context. It makes you deaf to nuance.
It also demolishes those two functions we just talked about. Inhibition and flexibility. Stress weakens the ACC's ability to dampen signals, which makes you highly distractible.
External noises seem louder.
They do. But the real problem is the internal noise. The worry loops, the self-doubt that gets amplified into a constant loud monologue inside your head.
And that amplification of internal noise is just a massive drain. It prevents you from isolating the speaker's signal effectively.
And the lack of cognitive flexibility means you get stuck. You get stuck in these rigid patterns of interpretation. You're less able to analyze objectively or update your view when new information contradicts your initial, often defensive reading.
And this rigidity then manifests as the fourth key problem: emotional biases and misinterpretation.
The stressed listener is hypervigilant. They're defensively wired. They start to read negative intentions into perfectly neutral communication.
So, interpreting a flat tone as being critical or a simple pause for thought as a sign of dismissal?
Exactly. Your listening shifts from trying to understand to trying to defend yourself, which inevitably leads to friction and misunderstandings, even when the speaker had the best of intentions. The stress itself creates the conflict.
Okay, so that covers the stress saboteur. But for listeners who might be dealing with a complex language like English, there's another powerful layer of disruption we have to address.
Yes, the inherent challenges of just decoding spoken language itself. We call these linguistic bottlenecks.
This is such a critical point, especially for anyone navigating English as a complex communication tool. We often think of spoken language as these neat, separate words on a page.
But the reality is an acoustic soup. It's a continuous stream where words are blurred and blended together.
And the biggest hurdle within that soup is the phonological challenge, what linguists call connected speech.
Exactly. Native speakers, to be more efficient, we naturally drop, change, and link sounds together. But this is the primary reason that words seem to just vanish for listeners.
Can you break that down? Give us some specific examples of this acoustic soup in action.
Certainly. So first there's elision, where sounds are dropped entirely. Think of the phrase next door. Very few people say next to door. The T sound just disappears. It becomes next door.
Or the word fax. It often just becomes fax.
Right. Then you have assimilation, where a sound changes to become more like its neighbor to make it easier to say. A great example is 10 bags. In rapid speech, it often sounds like 10 bags.
Because the N sound changes to an M sound to get ready for the B's that follows it. It's more efficient for your mouth.
It is. Then there's liaison, or linking, where a consonant at the end of a word links to a vowel at the beginning of the next.
Like pick it up becomes pick it up.
One seamless string.
Yeah.
But the most insidious challenge, and the one that really kills grammatical comprehension, is the use of reductions and weak forms.
This is fundamental to English because it's a stress-timed language. Content words, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, they get the stress and they're clear.
But function words, the little grammatical words like articles, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, they get rushed through and reduced.
They often get reduced down to the schwa sound, right? That really quick, unstressed sound.
That's the one. For example, almost no one says a cup of FT. It becomes a cup tea. That word of is barely there.
And if a listener is expecting a clear, stressed OF, their brain either misses it entirely or it spends precious processing time trying to decode a sound that was never fully articulated in the first place.
And missing those small function words, the a, the of, the to, it damages the grammatical structure you're trying to build in your working memory. You can't understand the relationships between ideas if you miss the connectors.
It's like trying to build something with missing screws. The foundation is weak.
Precisely. And if you add in unfamiliar accents which shift vowel sounds, or subtle, minimal pairs like mixing up ship and sheep, that momentary confusion causes the brain to pause, it creates a backlog, and the next few words simply vanish because of that processing lag.
So if the sounds themselves are a challenge, the next hurdle has to be the lexical and semantic challenge, the word meanings.
Right. We call this the ambiguity tax. Think about words with multiple meanings, words like bank or set or run.
They're everywhere in English.
They are, and they force the listener's brain to hold several possibilities open simultaneously, just waiting for more context to disambiguate. That waiting period taxes your working memory and it slows down your retrieval speed.
That makes perfect sense. My brain can't commit to a single meaning until the speaker finishes the thought, and if I'm holding 3 or 4 possible meanings for every other word, my RAM gets overloaded much faster.
And then there's non-literal language, idioms like kick the bucket, or phrasal verbs like look up or get over.
You can't understand those by just adding up the parts.
You can't. If that specific combination of words isn't already learned as a single chunk, the listener's brain treats it as an unknown word. And again, comprehension stalls.
And all of this is made worse by speed and retrieval. The brain has to pull up the word and its meaning incredibly fast. Native speech flows at about 120 to 150 words per minute.
So if your retrieval of meaning, your access to your vocabulary is just a little too slow, you start to lag behind. You create this chronic backlog where you're missing words simply because you lack the time to process them.
It's that critical distinction between passive vocabulary words you'd recognize if you saw them written down and active, rapidly accessible vocabulary, which is what you need for listening.
Yes, if you have to dig deep into your memory for the meaning of a word, you've already missed the next 3 words the speaker said.
Speaking of backlog, let's get to the grammar gauntlet. Even if I get all the words, the sentence structure itself can overload my working memory.
Absolutely. Long sentences with embedded clauses where there's a huge distance between the main subject and the verb, they are memory killers.
Can you give an example?
Sure, imagine hearing this. The report, which my colleague who's been out sick for a week submitted under extreme duress last Friday, contains several factual inaccuracies.
Wow, yeah. You have to hold on to the report for a really long time before you get to the main verb, which is contains. That takes a massive working memory effort.
It does. And then you have structural deviations, like the passive voice. The decision was made by the committee, or inversions like, never have I seen such a thing.
These force the brain to pause and reparse the sentence because it's not the expected subject-verb order. That disruption of flow, even for a split second, can be enough to lose the momentum of the speech stream.
And finally, the absence of written punctuation in speech means you have to rely entirely on prosody.
The rhythm, the pauses, the intonation.
Exactly. Those are the only signals you have for clause breaks and the relationships between ideas. If you misinterpret a pause thinking it's the end of a thought when it's just a breath, you can structurally confuse the entire idea. Prosody is the hidden grammar of speech.
This all brings us to what might be the ultimate cognitive bottleneck for many advanced learners: the translation habit.
This is perhaps the most taxing mental process of all. It's this multi-step indirect route of hearing a word in your second language, translating it to your native language, processing the meaning there, then formulating your own thoughts and translating them back.
It's incredibly slow and inefficient.
It's hugely taxing. It diverts massive cognitive resources away from current listening to process the past. You're essentially always 2 steps behind the speaker, and your capacity to hold new information is constantly being eaten up by that internal translation loop.
And we can't forget the lack of background knowledge.
Yeah.
If someone uses technical jargon or a cultural reference you don't have, the words have no mental slot to drop into.
Right. The words can't connect to a known schema or framework in your mind. And when that happens, the cognitive load goes up dramatically because your brain is forced to process those words as totally new information.
And wrapping all of this together is the psychological dimension: performance anxiety.
Yes. The fear of not understanding leads to excessive self-monitoring. That's the inner chatter, isn't it? The voice reviewing what you just missed, worrying about looking foolish, predicting your next failure.
And that self-monitoring consumes the very working memory and attention you need for external listening. So the anxiety creates the very problem it fears.
And because non-native processing requires more conscious effort, it causes listening fatigue much faster. And that fatigue, in turn, reduces your attention and your working memory, which leads to more missed words, creating this draining, negative spiral.
So we have this perfect storm. Stress is degrading the physical hardware of the PFC, while all these linguistic hurdles are constantly straining the software's capacity, your working memory, and retrieval speed.
Right. The collision of high stress and depleted focus, it systematically dismantles your listening accuracy. High cortisol degrades the PFC's control pathways, and that allows your internal anxiety to generate that dominant internal chatter.
And that worry loop, that inner monologue, it hijacks the cognitive spotlight. It pulls your focus inward, away from the speaker. It creates that cognitive load overload we talked about.
You're trying to run too many demanding programs on a system that already has degraded RAM. The system simply freezes or it fragments. The result is massive comprehension errors.
But understanding this destructive cycle is the first step toward breaking it.
Uh,
We need to leverage the Yerkes-Dodson law.
yes, the relationship between arousal and performance. This is so key to managing your communication energy.
Explain that for us.
Well, the Yerkes-Dodson curve shows that your performance increases with arousal or stress, but only up to an optimal point. It's like a bell curve.
Okay, so too little arousal boredom, disengagement leads to poor accuracy because you just lack alertness.
Right. The peak of the curve is the optimal arousal zone. You're alert, you're engaged, you're focused, but you're still calm. This is the sweet spot for deep listening.
But if you push past that peak into high arousal, into overwhelming stress, the PFC starts to shut down, tunnel vision kicks in, and your accuracy just plummets.
Exactly. So the goal for effective listening isn't some unrealistic ideal of zero stress. It's about managing ourselves to stay within that optimal zone, alert and ready, but not overwhelmed by internal noise.
And these dynamics, they aren't just academic, they define our professional and personal lives. Let's talk about how this plays out in high-stakes professional settings, like a negotiation.
Oh, absolutely. A stressed negotiator, maybe they're worried about failing or they're hyper-focused on executing their own strategy, is instantly vulnerable to cognitive tunnel vision.
Their attention narrows, so they become incapable of hearing the full message from the other side.
They'll miss the subtle concessions, the key qualifying phrases, the nonverbal cues that signal the other party is reaching a limit. Stress literally makes them deaf to crucial nuances.
And that results in bad deals or completely missed opportunities, all because they acted on an incomplete ground truth.
The impact on leadership is profound, too. Imagine a leader who is overwhelmed by stress, constantly distracted, maybe checking an email during a one-on-one meeting.
They're failing to allocate the mental resources for focused, empathetic listening.
And because of that, they miss the subtle but vital cues from their team. The signs of brewing burnout, low morale, quiet disengagement, underlying conflict.
So their failure of focus means their decisions are based on inaccurate or incomplete information about the reality within their own organization. The leader's internal stress literally filters out the truth.
Now consider truly critical life or death situations. Emergency services.
A 911 dispatcher,
Yeah.
operating under relentless chronic stress, they have to maintain absolute focus despite chaotic, emotional, and fragmented audio coming in.
A single misheard address, a misunderstood symptom due to a lapse in focus can have catastrophic consequences.
And their protocols are actually built to counteract this.
They are. They use focused, systematic questioning techniques designed specifically to cut through the stress and emotional static to ensure absolute accuracy in data collection.
We see similar dynamics in medical consultations. If the doctor is rushed because of their workload, or the patient is consumed by anxiety about their health, listening errors are just inevitable.
Right. Studies show doctors interrupt patients far too soon, preventing them from fully detailing their symptoms. Or, on the other side, patients who are overwhelmed by anxiety mishear or misremember dosage instructions or crucial lifestyle changes.
Small listening errors in that context can have massive health impacts.
And in our personal lives, the impact is on the very foundation of trust. If we're distracted by our own internal worries, we might hear the literal words our partner says, but we completely miss the emotional flavor.
The vulnerability, the unspoken need behind those words.
We fail to connect on an emotional level. And that failure to truly listen with sustained, open focus is often the single biggest source of erosion in intimacy and trust over time.
And when a conflict arises, that's the worst possible time for a conversation, because conflict immediately triggers the fight or flight stress response.
Instantly, we shift immediately into defensive listening.
Which means you're not listening to understand.
Not at all. You're listening to find flaws. You're listening to prepare your rebuttal. You're scanning their words for weaknesses you can attack while you're already formulating your counterargument in your head.
True. Objective comprehension is impossible in that state. Your entire cognitive system is geared towards self-defense, not open processing.
But the reverse cycle is also true, and this is the hopeful part. A listener who practices focused self-regulation can actually act as a grounding force in a tense conversation.
They can de-escalate the emotional temperature.
Exactly, and create the quiet mental space necessary for clearer, more accurate communication for everyone involved.
Okay, that paints a really compelling picture of the stakes and the mechanics. The good news is these are not fixed states. Attention, regulation, stress management, these are highly trainable skills.
They are. We can consciously build an arsenal of strategies to reclaim the signal. Let's start with calming the system, reducing that cortisol load, and building physical resilience in the PFC.
Top of the list has to be mindfulness and meditation. At their core, these are just advanced attention training exercises.
That's what they are. They directly strengthen the dorsal attention network, the one responsible for sustained goal-directed focus.
They teach you to notice your internal chatter, the worry loops, without judgment or immediate reaction.
Which significantly reduces their power to hijack your cognitive spotlight. You learn to observe the thought without becoming the thought. This practice strengthens self-regulation and it dampens that automatic fight-or-flight surge.
What about in the moment? When the stress is already bubbling up, what's the immediate physiological reset?
The most direct line to calming your system is through your breath. A physiological reset using deep, slow, diaphragmatic breathing. Breathing from your belly.
How does that work?
It sends a clear, powerful signal to your nervous system to activate the parasympathetic rest and digest system.
And techniques like box breathing, inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4, they can quickly downregulate the physical symptoms.
A racing heart, muscle tension, it can bring you back into that optimal arousal zone, alert but calm, right before a tough meeting.
And none of this works if the foundation is crumbling. We have to talk about sleep hygiene.
It is non-negotiable. Consistently getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep is fundamental brain maintenance. Chronic stress is massively amplified by sleep deprivation, which compromises the PFC's function severely.
It makes your attention control and your working memory sluggish.
Very sluggish. And finally, there's a mental technique. Reframing arousal, tapping into that Yerkes-Dodson idea.
So consciously relabeling it.
Yes. Instead of interpreting those butterflies in your stomach as debilitating fear, you intentionally reframe them as readiness. You tell yourself, my body is getting alert, it's preparing me to focus and perform well.
So you channel that adrenaline into useful, focused energy instead of letting it spiral into anxiety.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've calmed the system. Now let's talk about actively sharpening the focus spotlight itself with some specific active listening practices.
The first, and I think the most robust, is paraphrasing and summarizing. This is not just a polite thing to do. It's a powerful cognitive encoding tool.
So by actively synthesizing the information and saying it back, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the main point is X, Y, and Z, you're achieving 2 things.
You are. First, you're confirming accuracy for the speaker. But second, you are forcing your own brain to process and code that information much more robustly than if you just passively received it.
And we have to address the plague of modern communication, multitasking.
Yes. Commit to single tasking. Actively eliminate distractions during important conversations. Put the phone away, close the extra tabs, dedicate all of your cognitive resources fully to the speaker.
This is all about preventing that attentional drain. Your goal-directed dorsal network can't lock onto the speaker if it's constantly being pulled away by the reactive ventral network because of notification pings.
Single tasking isn't a suggestion, it's a prerequisite for accuracy.
And what about setting yourself up for success beforehand?
With pre-preparation. If you know you're going into an important meeting or lecture, review the agenda. Refresh your memory on the topic. Know who will be speaking.
This lowers the real-time cognitive load dramatically, doesn't it?
It does. It creates those mental slots or frameworks for your brain to anticipate, organize, and integrate the new information efficiently. You aren't processing a brand new topic, you're just updating an existing file in your brain.
And if you have to take notes,
practice strategic note-taking. The goal is not to transcribe everything verbatim. That actually pulls your attention away from comprehension and deep processing.
right. Instead, you should focus on capturing only the key words, the main ideas, the decisions that were made, and any action items. This helps offload your working memory while preserving your ability to stay focused on the speaker.
Now let's pivot back to those linguistic challenges, the acoustic soup and the speed lag. We need specific, targeted linguistic skill-building practices.
This is where we sharpen the tools to cut through connected speech, and the first, most effective practice is shadowing.
Yes. Shadowing means listening to a short segment of native audio and immediately repeating it, trying to mimic the rhythm, the intonation, the natural blending of words exactly as you hear them.
Why is that so powerful?
Because it builds your physical and auditory intuition for natural speech flow. It forces your brain to register the links and reductions as natural patterns, rather than treating every blended word as a mistake or a breakdown in communication.
It primes your brain to expect the weak forms and the schwa sound.
It does. And to truly confront the reality of connected speech, we also recommend transcribing short segments.
This sounds like hyper-attention training.
It is.
Hmm.
You take a 30 to 60-second clip of native speech and force yourself to write down every single sound you hear, not just the dictionary words. This is where you directly confront those drop T's, the schwa reductions, the assimilated sounds.
It brings those subconscious linguistic phenomena into your conscious awareness.
And to address the retrieval speed lag, we need to focus on learning in chunks and collocations. Stop learning isolated words.
Right. Prioritize high-frequency vocabulary and learn words as part of common phrases. So not just the word make and the word decision, but the chunk make a decision.
Or heavy rain, or take into account. This speeds up your lexical retrieval dramatically. The brain retrieves one large unit, the chunk, instead of having to compile 3 individual words. It instantly lowers cognitive load.
And finally, we have to learn to use prosody as a listening tool.
Mm.
So analyze sentence structures while focusing on the spoken cues.
Exactly. Consciously study transcripts of speech for complex grammar, but notice exactly where the speaker pauses, where their pitch rises or falls. Those are the spoken cues that signal the structure.
So by understanding how the grammar is physically marked by rhythm and intonation, you can better anticipate and hold on to the structure in real time.
Which brings us to the highest level, integrating emotional intelligence, EI, into your listening. This is the framework that manages all the stress and bias we've discussed.
And EI starts with self-awareness, recognizing your own internal state.
Noticing when you are stressed, when you're feeling defensive, or when a personal bias is coloring how you are receiving information. You have to know your own internal landscape first.
And then comes self-regulation. This is the ability to manage those impulses that derail accurate listening.
The impulse to interrupt, to jump in with your own experience, or to react defensively. Holding back those reactions, that self-control, is what creates the necessary objective mental space for the speaker to feel truly heard.
And perhaps the most powerful component for accuracy is empathy.
And this goes beyond just being polite. It's actively seeking to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, and the unstated needs that might be driving their words.
Empathy forces you to look beyond the literal words. It makes you integrate the nonverbal cues and the emotional flavor.
And it directly helps you counteract those stress-induced negative biases we talked about, allowing you to achieve a much more complete, accurate, and compassionate understanding of the whole message.
And finally, a word on bypassing that most crippling bottleneck. The translation habit.
You have to consciously practice thinking in English.
That's the real challenge.
Yeah.
Narrate your day internally in the target language. When you read something, internally summarize it in English.
The more you stop your brain from defaulting to that L1 translation loop, the faster your direct conceptual access becomes. And eventually, your processing rate can speed up until it matches the speed of native delivery.
And it requires cultivating the resilience to embrace imperfection.
Yes. See, missed words not as failures, but as data points that guide your learning. Focus on inferring the main meaning and keep listening. Don't mentally rewind. Maintain the flow.
We have truly journeyed through the intricate neural dance of listening. We've seen how chronic stress acts as a powerful saboteur, degrading working memory and narrowing attention, creating that cognitive tunnel vision.
And we've detailed how intentional focus is the essential trainable tool we all have to amplify comprehension, to cut through that acoustic soup, and to find meaning. Mastering listening really comes down to managing that dynamic tension between those two powerful forces within us.
It's so clear that conscious, focused listening is not passive. It's a profound, active act of respect. It's a critical building block for trust, for clarity, and for success in virtually every area of life.
You are not just a passive receiver of sound waves. You have the power to cultivate this skill and make it one of your greatest cognitive strengths.
And perhaps a final thought to mull over as you transition back into the hyper-connected world.
In a world that constantly rewards speaking and broadcasting loudness, consider this. How much of what you think you know about the people closest to you, your colleagues, your partner, your friends, is actually based on what you project onto them, or maybe what you wish they meant?
Versus what you truly, accurately heard and comprehended from them. That pursuit of genuine accuracy truly defines the quality and depth of our connections. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.